So thank you, Jill, and I do want to thank the NUA for this opportunity to speak on a topic that is incredibly near and dear to my heart. And I really appreciate so many of you taking part of your week to sit in and discuss this topic. I'm really jazzed to see more business owners considering the possibility of hiring and looking for ways to really strategize around our current skilled labor deficit. So I hope that this presentation is informative and hopefully inspiring. But let me give you just a little bit more background on me. As Jill said, my name is Cynthia Bleskachek. I am the creator of the Funky Little Chair. We are located in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we specialize in training and education. Now, my point of entry for professional upholstery was that I started to learn from my mom, who was a self-taught home-based business owner. And that certainly does impact the way that I look at education and how new professionals are actually coming in and what the role of training might be in facilitating greater and earlier success for those candidates. But I also did have the opportunity as a young professional to work in a few multi-person workrooms, which was very helpful both for developing my skills and then also to see how that workplace shifts when you go from a solopreneurship into even a small team that is working together and hopefully continuing to develop the skills of their individual team members. Now, what I did not see was people coming in my age group. It turns out that Minnesota was the only state with an active trade association. I did not know that at the time, but I did have the opportunity to sit alongside my professional colleagues, and most of them were approaching retirement age, which I found curious that we didn't have sufficient workforce to absorb their workload. So very early on, I was really asking about that. Well, where did our education go? And what are we doing to address this imminent shortage that is so easily to observe? And I got a lot of, just don't worry about it. Just be a great upholsterer, which if you've ever met me in person, you know that is just not how Cynthia is wired. So after I banged my head on every door I could find and I pestered every person I could chase down with my questions, about 5.5 years ago, I decided the thing to do was to open our own teaching focused space and really start trying to dig in on these questions that I thought were very interesting and very important and very under addressed. And so that was the start of the Funky Little Chair. And we certainly do welcome hobbyists into our space, first because education is a fantastic tool for outreach. And secondly, because that is where a lot of our new professionals are coming from, is that they are starting with upholstery as a hobby. So we really do want to welcome those individuals in. But our passion is professional training. And when I say professional training, to me, the metric for success on that is, are we connecting candidates into career paths? Are we getting people over that threshold to where they can pursue upholstery as a career? And that question is a lot more complex than just saying, well, this is the best way to join welt cord, or how are we assembling our cushions? So I want to share with you some of our journey, specifically in the last 5 years, our observations, our conversations, our research, our successes, our misses, so that hopefully you have a little bit of context for the resources and recommendations that I'm going to be sharing today, and also to perhaps explain why I'm here talking to business owners, and I'm not just sitting back in our classroom refining our teaching resources. So I want to start with this. I think that every productive conversation begins from a place of honesty. If you have a new client come in and right out of the gates, they are underestimating the scope of the project, it can only end badly sooner or later for everybody involved. So when we talk about we have a skilled labor shortage, we have nobody to hire, we need to be training new professionals, what exactly is the scope of that project? What does it really take? if our goal is to train a new professional upholsterer. And for that, I'm going to go back to my home state of Minnesota, where if you want to be a card-carrying journeyman upholsterer who has completed an official government-sanctioned apprenticeship, I don't know anyone who's done it in decades, but I believe it's still a thing you can theoretically do. If you wanted to do that, the state would say that you need to complete 6,000 hours with one workroom. That is 3 years full time. If you move to a different business, you would need to start clocking hours all over again. Now, personally, I think that 3 years makes you kind of a baby upholsterer. At 3 years, I still had plenty of things I hadn't learned and a lot of room for improvement. But this is helpful because it at least gives us a number to work with. And I think the average business that hires someone with the intention of training is certainly not imagining a 3-year turnaround on that investment. So 3 months in, 6 months in, that candidate still has a lot of questions. They're not very fast. They're not working independently at a professional level. And that tends to lead to a lot of hand-wringing and frustration. But in all likelihood, it might have been a fine candidate. It might have been a fine business, but we may have just stepped into that relationship with an unrealistic expectation of what it was going to take to get them there. So you are small business owners. I don't need to tell you that having someone in your workshop on a 3-year learning curve is disruptive, to put it lightly. And it's very hard financially to make that relationship work. So not surprisingly, we have not seen a lot of businesses throwing open their doors to welcome in apprenticeship relationships. But what has happened in the last decade, as our skilled labor force has indeed retired in mass, is that now it's catching up with us. And we go, there's nobody to hire. Does anybody know where I can find skilled help? I have the capacity for growth, but there is nobody to hire. We need to be training professionals. We need to be putting education back up. And I agree. And there is a role for education to play in this solution that we are seeking. But when we started, and I think most people have this idea of thinking, well, if we put classrooms back up, then we'll have professionals. If you put the school there, then the next step is that we're going to have professionals to hire. And that is very dangerously oversimplified. If you look at any job field, you'll find that there is a bridge intended to carry candidates from classroom into career, right? Because the classroom cannot give you repetition. It cannot give you experience. It cannot give you all the varieties that you're going to encounter. There's just so much that the classroom was never designed to deliver. So if we're really talking about professional training, we cannot treat it as a classroom only discussion. We really have to look at where is that bridge for upholstery, such as it would be for teachers or auto mechanics or electricians. How are we going to carry those candidates into the workforce? So I'm going to go back again to Minnesota when we talk about like what it takes to create a professional. If you were lucky enough in Minnesota to go through one of our degree programs when they existed. The last one was Century College. It closed in the mid-90s. Steve Cohn, the author of Upholstery Basics Plus, was the creator and the director of that program. If you were lucky enough to go through that program, it would have picked up 2,000 hours of your training, 18 months, 2,000 hours, which, guess what, does not make you an experienced professional. It assumes that you are going to go into the workforce and you are going to continue to cultivate your skills either independently or under a more experienced upholsterer so that you can gain speed, so that you can gain proficiency and independence and all those things. So education was an important part of the conversation. But again, you can't really put up this piece of the pie without asking, what about this? Because this does not work without the rest of that. So I just want you to hold that in your brain for just a moment. Now, when we started, I didn't know all of that. I just thought, let's get the hours up. Let's get our promising candidates to commit to more hours in the classroom. Let's start with a quantity issue. So I went around and I hand selected our most promising local students and asked them to spend 9 months in the workshop with us once a week for about 4 hours. We're going to be real out on social media. We're going to network aggressively at the local level. We're going to see what we can attract. And we got them all the way up to 200 hours, a handful of candidates before our model tipped, which sounds like we're doing a pretty banging job. There's probably some people on this call who wish that they had 200 hours of hands-on training. But if you hold it against that 6,000 hour metric, what we were giving them was about 3% of what the real goalpost is to achieve proficiency. And in the process of doing that, we attracted students from all across the country. We became one of the leading education platforms at 200 hours. And really what I was thinking as an educator watching this, and so now we have people flying in who are maybe getting 30 or 40 or 50 hours with us. And what this says to me as an educator is there's no sense in optimizing 3%. It's just not enough. Even if you can push it up to 4 or 5%, the fact is it doesn't matter how good the student was. It doesn't matter how good the educator was. We just have a critical mass issue. And we always have to ask, well, which 3% would you like? Do you want to do a slip seat? Should we do a cushion? Do we just jump into the deep end and ignore the basics we didn't have time to go over? So already I was thinking we can't be talking about that 3%. We have to address where candidates are supposed to get that other 97. We can't just send them home to training deserts and hope that they find it, which is when we started looking at things like blended training models and flipped classrooms and videos in conjunction with live training to go, what can we give them to review in advance? You don't need to watch Sarah sew a whole cushion in person. We can put that on a video for you, and then you can come in knowing what we're going to work on. What if we put up a spring video so that you don't tie springs once and then you go home and can't remember any of the knots? Let's put that in a video so people have a way to revisit the information besides flying back to St. Paul. Now, what I want to communicate to you as a business owner is that if you look at this, if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking, if we just put up education, then I could pull up to the drive-through window and pick up my experienced candidate and all my hiring woes would be over. You're going to be waiting for a long time because education never worked like that. And we are in fact further away than we have ever been, because what has happened over the years is this, and I am quite convinced that apprenticeship paths actually collapsed first, that we lost the bridge between classroom and career. And if you cannot connect your graduates to early employment, you don't just keep training more and funnel them into a dead end. You gradually defund that program. You raise the ratios, you optimize for casual learners, and then the only point of entry, or the most viable point of entry, became for our candidates to take a sliver of education, turn their hobby into a side hustle, and for a select few to take that side hustle and turn it into a new small business. They're basically apprenticing themselves for lack of early employment alternatives. And that's probably how a few people on this call got into upholstery, would be my guess. So let's start by saying kudos to you, because that is not an easy path. And for that to be the easiest point of entry right now for upholstery really kind of says something about where we are as a trade community. But here's the pickle that we're now all in together. Whether you are one of these older established businesses or you're a new business that managed to use this point of entry, we're now all banging our heads on the same low ceiling, which is that there's nobody to hire because we have made self-employment a requirement for professional entry. We can't even see candidates until they have opened a business and demonstrated that they're experienced enough to work And by which point, if I have had to open my own space, if I've had to buy my own equipment and establish my own client base, the chances that I'm looking to work in someone else's shop are slim to none. We have lost those candidates. They have washed out early on because they did not have a bridge to employment. So this was very, very curious to me as an educator, because I spend half my time in the classroom with what I think are very promising candidates, but they're inexperienced. And the other half in actual workrooms that are maxed out, but can't figure out how to do anything with a candidate that is that inexperienced. You just think, well, there's got to be some answers here, but we pushed that linear model as far as we could, and we didn't even get close. 3%, that's a lot of bridge to try and throw candidates over into the job field. So how else could we approach this? Well, what if we tipped this model on its side, and instead of saying you're going to be a student and then you're going to go into the workforce, what if we tipped these and said they're not mutually exclusive? You can be a student and a professional at the same time, and there may be some mutual benefits to that. If you are on a 3-year training curve, we're going to have to approach this differently. So this is what we started to look at, and truthfully, this is what our successful candidates were doing. This is our Lindsay Orwigs. This is our Rhonda Shanahans, our Nancy Sargents. This is our Grant Tricks. These are people who very early on got into the market and started really sharing their services and learning on the job through self-employment. But the good ones also kept investing in education, because that grows your skills faster, and it gives you greater skill, right? Learning on your own is very, very tough. So what if we could take this model and we could move it over to these workrooms to say, listen, you can't wait. You cannot wait until they're 6,000 hours in. They're never going to get there. You're going to have to catch people very, very early and see if you can give them a place to learn and grow and work that isn't setting up their own business. What would training look like if our goal was to facilitate on-the-job training and helping workrooms bring apprentices directly in and make sure that it sticks and make sure that they grow and make sure that the numbers are mutually beneficial and we can afford to keep doing this? And that is how we started building the instructional units that eventually became FLC Upholstery 200 Fundamentals, which, if you follow us on social media, you'll know this is the online training program that we launched just a few months ago. I'm going to talk a bit about it, but you may have seen it. If you have not, it is a fully online training program. You can take it self-paced if you think that you can get through the content independently, and I think a lot of people can. Or you can take it with 12 weeks of instructor support in a student cohort, and that would be our certificate version, because then we can actually see that the work is being executed and it gives you a check-in. But it's 9 project courses, which I'll talk about in more detail, and then 3 business courses, because the fact remains most people are coming in that hobby to side hustle to small business path. It has very detailed, lengthy videos. It has written instructions. There's also things like quizzes so that students can check their knowledge as they go. We have self-assessment so they can evaluate their work. We have downloadable forms so that they are actually practicing good habits throughout the program. And there are some beyond the course sections that look at how to apply some of these projects into real world situations like window seats. We also talk about equipment, tool demonstrations, professional materials, all those things that you need to know if you're going to deliver a professional product. And then if you are in that instructor supported track, then you do get 12 weeks of an instructor supported cohort. That means you come in with a student group after you've tried the project. And if you got stuck, you have questions, you need clarification, you have a sounding board for that. And you have a peer group, which is a very important part of professional and training success. Okay, So I'm going to be talking really about the project portion of those today, because if you're trying to bring in an apprentice, that really is the barrier in question, is whether or not people can get enough technical skills fast enough to be an asset to your team. But there are also those 3 business courses in there. And again, frankly, if you have an apprentice, I think it's great for them to know that a successful upholstery business is really not just about the technical skills. There are a lot of other things that have to work if your goal is upholstery as a career. So those are in there. But I want to talk about the project courses, because I cannot emphasize this enough. It is not just about making a cushion and making a slip seat. If you give me a weekend warrior, you'll be pretty amazed at the project I can get them through by standing beside them and going, okay, do this, okay, do this, okay, do this, okay, do this. And by the end of the weekend, they might have a pretty good looking chair. Doesn't guarantee that they've actually learned anything in our time together. This ain't that. This is, we love the word at FLC, we love the word scaffolding. This is a training scaffolding that is meant to move candidates very intentionally in stages towards a basic level of professional fluency. It is the difference. One of the tough things about training in your workroom is that nothing is optimized for education. Nothing. Everything that comes through your doors is a variation on a theme, right? So it's like trying to teach someone to read by walking into the library and just pulling books randomly off shelves. That's going to be a tough way to go. But if you can teach someone to read by backing up and going, this is the alphabet, these are the letter sounds, these are sight words, let's start to string together some phonetic sentences, that's a scaffolding. And let me tell you what this scaffolding actually looks like inside the program. My very favorite place to start a candidate is a plain seam cushion, the boring plain Jane rectangular project. Why? Because we need to get them on that sewing machine immediately. It's going to take them a long time to get competent on that machine. And until they're comfortable with the equipment, we can't begin to talk about more complex things. So this cushion is going to ensure that they know how to operate the machine. They know how to thread the machine. They can control the speed. They know how to keep even seam allowances. They can turn corners neatly, right? And we're also going to introduce cut lists and cut diagrams so that they're using correct terminology and they recognize the tools that are going to be coming at them. Next, we're going to level that up. Same project, we're just going to stick a welt cord in there, which does increase the technical difficulty, right? Now let's see if you can keep your layers together. Now let's see if your boxing is straight, your corners are stacked, you have stitching showing. And let's reiterate again, let's use that cut list. Let's use that cut diagram. Then we're going to have a little mercy on them and move over to the bench. Now, every second rich housewife in the country has wrapped fabric around their kitchen seats at some point and said, hooray, I'm ready for advanced upholstery. This is not that. We are teaching them how to safely and efficiently and completely tear back down to that frame. We're going to talk to them about how to build up a basic foundation, choose the appropriate webbing, apply it neatly, interweave it. What's the burlap for? How are we going to choose foam that is comfortable and lasts long enough? How do we take this ratty old piece of fabric and work it back to that cut list and diagram? How are we going to get it on there so that it's exactly straight, it's smooth out to the corners, and those corners are neatly trimmed and folded? Because all of that we need to be able to take for granted when they get to chairs later on, right? So we're introducing it all now. Now, we also know upholstery is all about variation. Successful candidates will be artists and they will be problem solvers who can take this project and spin it out into things that don't look exactly like this project. So we're going to give them a variation. It's a slip seat again, but now it's circle and it's vinyl, which is a very different medium. How do we need to adapt our process? Let's talk about that. Then this is where I feel like it really gets good. We've given you some time on the machine. We've taken you over to the bench. Can you put these two things together? Can you demonstrate enough control at the sewing machine that your cover can be fitted to a fixed board? Is it way too small? Is it way too big? Did it go on all twisted and crooked? This actually demonstrates quite a lot of technical control if they can do this. So we're going to start to, again, build that scaffolding. And then we look at a little foundation work. We've already talked to them about webbing, right? So now we can say the webbing's kind of the same thing. Let's put springs on there. Let's talk about the knots that you're going to need, which, by the way, when they get to an edge wire system, knowing this is going to help them learn that. But by the time they get to their final project, which is the basic side chair, we have introduced and reiterated so many concepts, so many terms, so many skills, that at this point, all we should have to talk about is how to back tack that front edge, how to hand sew the back on, how to make those easement cuts. They already know how to build a basic foundation. They know how to center work their way out. They recognize a cut list. They recognize a cut diagram. They know how to clean up their corners and turn those under. So the candidate who has gotten all the way through this very methodically is in a very good position to go into their own business or somebody else's and really be an asset in a number of ways and to continue to grow in their skill set, because we are still on that longer timeline, right? Now, if you watch us on social media, you'll know we have been talking extensively to the end user, to the individual students who might be buying this to train themselves. But I want to really make clear that this was designed in partnership with workrooms, with firsthand observations, with candidates that we were taking back and forth from the classroom to the businesses and seeing how we could make those relationships work. So we do believe that it's an excellent tool to accelerate your apprentices early in their career. And where we would recommend using it is right about here. Now, if you want to hire, your first step actually isn't training, it's to recruit and vet some people. And by recruit, I mean, you're going to have to build a funnel here. Where can we pull people in? And once you mentally get past skilled help, skilled help, skilled help, skilled help, you can open your brain to going, who is around you that might be willing to learn? Who is around you that might be coachable? Can you find people with sewing skills? How about people with an art minor? Can you cross-train, some woodworkers? Like, where can we pull some promising candidates from? And then I would encourage you to have a way to vet them. It might surprise you that if someone walks into our St. Paul space and says, I love this, I want to be an upholsterer, I'm definitely going to quit my day job and do this as a career, we don't send them right to a business and we don't send them right into FLC 200. We say, that sounds great. Try a Weekend Warriors as your first step, because 95% chance they're going to wash out because it wasn't what they expected. Their hands hurt, it's messy, it's abstract, it's more frustrating than they had expected. And so we don't want to jump into the deep end and assume that this is going to be a thing immediately. It's really good to give them a little trial period. Make sure they're a team fit with your other employees. Make sure they're reliable. They're going to show up. Give them a little bit of coaching and make sure that they don't start throwing tools. You want to make sure that you feel reasonably good that they can do the work. Then that FLC Upholstery 200 Fundamentals is designed to accelerate them to a place where they can offer some assets to your business and you guys can afford to keep working together. Then you'll see, right, there's this nice long manage, develop phase on the other side, because let's not forget, 12 weeks does not a master upholsterer make. And especially at this point, if you are intent on hiring, then your business is going to have an ongoing responsibility to manage and develop your team. And spoiler alert, even if you were hiring skilled people, that is still part of the equation if you are planning to hire. It's just a little more of the equation if you're hiring apprentices instead of master upholsterers. So that's where we would recommend utilizing that tool if you are using it as an apprentice accelerator. Now, we are offering today $50 off for NUA members off either track. The self-paced is always available. The instructor supported, we start quarterly, and we just put up our fall cohorts. Carla Pyle from Natural Upholstery and Michelle Minner from Blue Roof Cabin are our virtual instructors, but those spots just opened up. And NUA members do get $50 off. I got to tell you, one of the things that impedes us all professionally, in my opinion, is a lack of shared resources, trade associations, all those things that we should have to tap into. So as a thank you to those of you who are members, we're offering that discount. It's behind the membership wall. Jill maybe can clue us in on how exactly to find that. And if you're not a member yet, maybe something to think about, that this is a resource that we will all potentially benefit from going forward. Okay, so that's the salesy pitch part of my presentation, but I want to end with 3 recommendations specifically for business owners, because in the last 2 years especially, I have invested my time not in the classroom, but in the overwhelmed businesses, trying to work directly with them to go, how can we get around this skill gap and get you the candidates that you really need for your business to thrive. So these are 3 recommendations to help you specifically on the business end. And I'm going to start with some quotes. So hiring experts estimate the companies need to talk to 27 candidates to fill 1 open position. One of the first things to kind of wrap your brain around is that we're all competing for talent. That is not upholstery's unique cross to bear. If you're hiring waitresses or doctors or mechanics or roofers or teachers, hiring is tough and retaining is harder. But I see a lot of businesses sort of talk to 2 candidates and then throw up their hands and go, oh, it's just hopeless. There's no skilled help. There's nothing to be done. And the fact is, it just takes a bigger net than that. So figuring out, we're not looking for one magical unicorn. We're trying to figure out how you're going to have a funnel to bring people into your business. Just like you cultivate your client base and you don't get one client and they go, I never need any other clients, I just hope they stay. You continue to cultivate and refine your client base over time, so that if one of them leaves, you still have others going on and you have others coming in. So think about, if you take out of the equation, I need skilled help, I need skilled help, I need skilled help. If you take that out of the equation, look around. What do you have to work with in your local community? What other assets can you leverage? How are you going to attract them? And how are you going to vet them? So based on the latest statistics, the average job tenure for an early to mid-career employee is just under 3 years. By the way, The Best Team Wins here is one of my favorite books that I read in the last year and a half, because it really opened my eyes to the fact that there's a lot of things besides skill training that really impede hiring success. So I recommend that you read that. But this quote specifically really struck me, because if you've been paying attention, 3 years is what? It's the exact number I gave you for how long it takes to train a skilled upholsterer, which is a little inconvenient if you have been losing money on training them for 3 years and then they leave. And we do see this a lot with businesses that are like, I brought someone in, I trained them, I invested in them, and then they left. And the truth is, they probably are going to leave. That's just the nature of work right now. If they stay past 3 years, great, what a bonus. But we really should be assuming that that's not going to be the case. Hence why we're really focusing on how can they be, a 5% asset here, a 10% asset here, a 20% asset here. How else can we ensure that the business benefits earlier and as they grow, so that when and if they do leave, we say, thank you. You have really been an asset to the business in your time here. And my biggest recommendation would be to delegate in single steps and single stages. When we are in the classroom, we have to work in full projects. I can't have a bunch of half-finished chairs in our St. Paul classroom. But the second that I go into a business and I put on my workroom manager hat, I'm not giving apprentices full chairs. I'm trying to limit the skills that they are working with so that they have a chance to see repetition, because repetition is going to give them fluency. And I need them to be fluent so that I can walk away and they're going to be fast enough and they're going to be consistent enough that it works. So for example, and one of the first things I'll say actually is this is where it's really helpful to have just a little bit of commercial work. So if you're thinking about hiring, see if you can't track down even some small commercial work, because if you're looking at a restaurant or a hotel lobby or something like that, and you can prototype ahead, you can delegate out 80 to 90% of that project because you did the first one and you figured out all the things. And then you can have one student tear back and one bolt back together and one do all the cutting based off patterns. But if you're custom residential, fear not, you can still do this, but you're not going to give a candidate a whole cushion. You're going to have them sew up all the welt cord and get comfortable on that machine. You're going to have them serge all the edges of your pieces. My favorite way to phase candidates in is number one, tear back. We all start candidates there, but it's not just about taking the fabric off. We're going to have them label things so they're learning part names. We're going to teach them how to clean up after themselves. What are the expectations? We're going to vet them and make sure that they get along with our other people, that they show up on time, that they do the work. They're not like take 5 staples out and then sit on their phone for 20 minutes. If that's happening, there's not a lot of sense in moving on. The second place I like to send them is actually the cutting table, which a lot of people go, you can't send a student to the cutting table. But remember, we're going to break those steps apart. I'm not going to have them do the cut list and the diagram. I'm going to teach them how to read a cut list and a diagram. And I'm going to make sure that they have some basic math skills, that they're detail oriented, that they can label things correctly. But if I can hand off cutting, that can save me hours and hours in a week. And I might also have them step onto the sewing machine at this point. Sew up all our single welt cord, because again, until you're comfortable with the machine itself, I certainly can't teach you a crowned cushion or an attached cushion back chair. And then the third place I would send them is outside backs. There's a few more skills going on, but they're limited nonetheless. And when I think we feel under pressure a lot of times to keep our apprentices entertained. We have to give them variety. They're going to be bored. They're going to go away. Number one, no, they're not. Number two, you're actually undermining them. If I have them do springs today and then a wing chair, and then we're going to sew a cushion, and then we're going to learn how to maintain the compressor, I'm depriving them of the repetition that they need to achieve fluency. And they're not going to appreciate it later on when I resent them for asking questions. So give them a skill, let them sit with it until they really understand it. And by the time you get to like an outside back, today's outside back might be velvet. The next one might be linen. The next one might have a stripe. The next one might have a curve. There is so much variety inherently built in to upholstery. You don't have to manifest it. You have to work around it. But by the time, if I can get a candidate over 3 to 6 months to tear back independently, to read my cut diagrams, to sew my welt cord, and to put on outside backs, they're not a master upholsterer. They're still a long way from that 6,000 hour, but think about the time that saves me. Think about how much work that actually is, that they can take off my shoulders and be a benefit to the business, and that we can continue to add skills on to their palette. Okay, last one. It's so hard for me not to keep talking about this. This really is my favorite thing in the world. So from one of my very favorite women in the whole world, if you aren't following Scarlet Thread Consulting with Michelle Williams, what are you even doing with your life? If an owner is doing every job in a company with no clear systems, it will be difficult to hire and retain great employees. And here's what's beautiful. Again, this is not an upholstery thing. This is just a straight small business thing. When solopreneurs go to hire their first or second employee and they figure out that everything is loosely defined in their head, and you figure this out the first time you have someone tear back, you say, okay, take all the fabric off. And then you come back and you go, you destroyed all the fabric. You ripped out the springs. You threw away the thing that I need. You left all the staples in. You discover firsthand that you don't really have anything documented. And I tell you what, whether you're hiring apprentices or experienced upholsterers, I know you're not hiring psychics. So nobody can guess what is in your head. You're going to have to define it in order to delegate it. And I don't mean sit down and write down every step of a Chesterfield sofa. Let's start small. Let's start with like end of day cleanup. What do you expect? Is just sweeping okay? Do they need to take out a vacuum? Who's going to clean the common areas? Do their tools need to go back to a specific location if they're in the middle of a project? Is it okay to just pile it up on top of there? If you don't know how you want it done, I guarantee that your apprentice won't be able to guess. So I didn't go to my next slide. There you go. Couple of great books. I already mentioned The Best Team Wins. I think that one's great. The E-Myth Revisited. That was one of Michelle's recommendations. I really love that. And then Everyone Deserves a Great Manager was one of my recent ones that I really enjoyed. Just feel empowered that there's a lot you can actually do as a business owner to achieve greater success in hiring, even if your candidates are not coming in skilled. All right, I don't know how I did on time, but I am ready for some questions that I hope people have. So I'm going to stop sharing. Can I stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, what did I do?
You're good.
Did you hear me almost swear? I thought that I stopped the meeting. I almost said a naughty word on an NUA webinar.
It's all right. It's all right. We have, I have editing, skills, so I'm okay. So fantastic. Oh my gosh. I love it that you said that we are not psychics, or that our potential employees or whomever are in our shops, they're not psychic. They can never know. And that really resonates with me, because I recently let someone go and I felt like I was stuck, and that's exactly what it was. I didn't have the time to train her like I should have, because my processes were all messed up in my head. Honestly, it was just what happened to me over the last year. Prior to that, I had great processes in place, but this last year has kind of thrown me for a loop.
You're ahead of most of us, because I think most people don't have, I certainly didn't when I started trying to delegate stuff. And then you figure out like, well, the problem isn't my candidate. The problem is that I can't even articulate what I expect them to do.
Yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I know that we spoke about this a couple months back, Cynthia, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this today, because I always have an issue with having the time to train someone. And I asked you, and I don't know if you remember this, but I asked you, is this program, would this be great for me to purchase and then have my employee watch it? And you're like, absolutely. And I think that would be wonderful, because for one, it's not taking time away from me, but they're also, they're learning great skills from great instructors at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, really, we were very heartened to be hearing pretty quickly. I think you and some others figured out even before we did that, like, hey, wait a second, this could actually be really good for the workrooms, because if you find someone that you're like, I really like them, I would like them to stay, but I don't know how to get them there.
Yeah.
And that actually, I mean, finding someone who's a good fit for your business is half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yes, getting them over that kind of critical hurdle. And I do think if you can get them to a point where, if you can get them past a point where you're not teaching them every single thing from the beginning,
mm-hmm.
it's a lot easier to delegate to someone who knows what a tack strip is and can operate the sewing machine and can read and understand a cut diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Then training in-house becomes a lot more feasible, but
mm-hmm.
that first stretch is a bear. And I think we lose a lot of good candidates
mm-hmm.
In that, in that initial phase. So we definitely did. And we're getting questions. We're getting questions from people to go, because we know businesses are maxed out. We know that they have capacity to do more work, but that the staffing is a barrier. And that whether you're using an online training tool or you're trying to do it yourself, there's a cost associated with it. And trying to stand there and train someone is really tough, really tough.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you have the two tiers, the two different kind, the instructor led and the self-paced too, because it's nice to be able to have those options. If you can't be the one that's teaching them all the time, and then they can kind of go through it at their own pace if that's the kind of learner that they are.
Yeah. And to be honest, looking at the way good candidates have been coming in and what people have been able to do off YouTube and books and self-teaching and the forums, like I have great faith in candidates' ability to take a self-paced program and get the mileage out of it. I know that some people really like the instructor cohort because you do have a check-in to keep you accountable and make sure they kind of get.
Yep.
But I think the self-paced is a really great option. We tried to make it as like, tried to make it so that you don't need an instructor. That was certainly the goal, but we are finding that people like to have a check-in.
So if somebody started off with the self-paced and then just decided, I'm not as diligent or not as, I'm not as good as keeping track of my time and could they switch from one to the other is what I'm getting at.
They absolutely
could they start with one and then with the other?
We just recently added that. And so the way that it presents is if you're in that self-paced and you decide, you know what, I need to upgrade, then you can apply a coupon. And I think, it's almost 100%. It's not quite 100%, but you can apply almost 100% of your program and hop over into one of those cohorts. You can we do also have virtual instructor support for those who are like, I just have a question and then I'm good. I can move on. But, and I see Lewis has a couple questions.
He does. Yes.
So, hey, Lewis, how are you doing? And I know I owe you a response in one of the NUA Slack as well. And my brain was so full from practicing for this. We're certainly open to teaching for furniture manufacturing. I think we kind of look at what's going on in Minnesota, and my heart is very much in the aftermarket. But it's all tied together. It really is all tied together. But my heart is like, I'm excited to see aftermarket alternatives to landfill for sure, but we're not opposed to teaching for furniture manufacturing. It seems like they tend to have a better handle. I mean, I know the, the Catawba Community College, that there's some good programs really established for feeding into the manufacturing community, but, we're open to lots of things and kind of putting our feelers out there to see what sticks. And I haven't done much researching into as far as grants in general. I mean, we all like money. I'm always open to money. We have self-funded thus far, partly because I wanted us to be able to build it the way that we thought it should be built, because I don't think it's a great big brick and mortar school for the reasons that I kind of went through. So we opted to self-fund thus far so that we could throw money at it and do whatever we wanted to try and answer these questions. And then as far as grants go, though, I really think I'm very curious about, and Chris from K Chesterfield had asked me about this too. I very much want to be able to figure out if we can answer some of these employment questions, because again, whether we have grants or not, there's no sense in training people if we can't really actually connect them to careers. So that's why we're talking to businesses to really go, what would make people employable? What would make it possible for you to keep this person in your growing business? Because I think if we can prove that, then we really can receive grants or funding or whatever it is to go, we've built it in a way that actually makes sense, not just the way it used to be, not the way that only serves, this tiny, tiny fraction of the country. So I'd really like to have some answers to that end. So that we can confidently go after grants and go, yes, you know what? The businesses value our training. It is helping them grow. It's helping them employ people. And then we can talk about where to go from there. Because if you look back, like Minnesota particularly, we had the Upholstery Journal that folded, again, I think in the mid-90s. And one of the things you can observe in their last articles was that people were not hiring candidates out of the training program. And if you talk to that last school of graduates, they're all self-employed. We had really lost the connection between training and working. And to me, I mean, my passion really is, if there is work, education should be attempting to facilitate that success, not just kind of training and, we're great upholsterers and they're not really able to meet any of these market needs that businesses have. Does that make sense? But I'm hoping that in the year ahead, we continue to learn, we continue to grow, and we have now a big toolkit we did not have a year and a half ago. Thank you very much, COVID, for designing online training and putting it in places that we hope businesses and apprentices can access it without flying to St. Paul. If you have someone in your workroom and you can show them how to operate your sewing machine, let's just train them right there. That makes a lot more sense to me. So, but I am going to go back and read the articles that you linked because I was curious about that. But I thought if I read those, I'm gonna stop practicing for this presentation.
Well, we still have a lot of attendees that are still on the webinar today. And I encourage you all to enter in your question in the chat or the Q&A section, or even raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask a question live. That works too.
Yes, please. I just adore this topic. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, my husband is pretty sick of me chasing him around the house, talking to him about apprenticeship paths. So,
oh my gosh, I just had a visual there.
He's a very good sport, but yeah, upholstery education is not his passion. And I do see, I'm scrolling through, I see a number of workroom owners, which is heartening. I think that's a question. Are most people on here, are you attending as an apprentice, or are you attending as someone who is curious about hiring for your business? I would be interested to know. And I know both. Oh, hi, how are you? It's good to see you. Heck yes, and I know that Ruti, did I say that right? I always feel like I'm going to get the yay. Okay. Both a very, very talented apprentice yourself and also working in a workroom to kind of see, and I'm wondering if you're seeing firsthand and some of the struggles that we really, you do have these businesses that are interested in. Hi, Jen, it's so good to see you. And you got to come out and see my business soon. It's still kind of in shambles, but thinking about training or teaching. And I am so excited. I mean, I'm sure you all know decades, you couldn't get your foot in the door with a workroom. And again, I don't want to minimize the investment and the challenges to hiring an apprentice. They are significant, but I'm just so excited to see more businesses really going if the work is there surely are solutions. And I assure you there are. And the first workroom that hired our students was mine. We did North Memorial Hospital my first year. And I had a lot of failed starts too, of things that I'm I just delegated that and paid someone to do it. And then I stayed and did it myself for free because I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have delegated that out, but we've learned a lot. And I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to see businesses going, because for years too, in Minneapolis, we're hearing it's just a dying industry. Nobody wants to pay. Nobody wants to do this work. And evidence suggests that is absolutely not the case. There is a lot of market potential. There are absolutely good candidates who are interested in doing it, but the points of entry are very, very long and complex. So let's see, we have workroom owners. Yep, talking about funnels. Look at that funnel. Absolutely. I listened to a podcast with a company that makes high-end bags, and I forget what company it was, but she said I hire artists. I don't hire bag makers. I hire artists because they know how to manipulate different mediums. And I thought, she's completely right. That's really smart. The person who say it's got to look like that. So thinking outside the box a little bit about what you might actually be training for. I'll tell you guys, one of my very, very, very top factors that I want to see in a candidate is that they are coachable, which is one of the I completely lost my train of thought. Coachable. Oh, yeah, which is one of the advantages actually to hiring unskilled people, because if you hire someone who already does upholstery their way, chances are they are not terribly interested in being coached. But if you have someone who comes in on the understanding that they are being trained, they tend to be a lot more coachable. When you say, I want you to do this step and then come back so I can check it and make sure that I was clear in my instructions. Coachable is, I wouldn't look for upholstery skill first. I would look for coachable. And in terms of how long would I try an apprentice to determine if they're viable? That's a good question. Maybe 2 to 4 weeks. And you really have to be gentle with them. Like, you really have to not throw them to the wolves and just expect them to, hey, you're really welcome, Anne. Thank you for coming in and sitting in on this. If you're struggling to vet your employees or to get them started, I encourage you to look into the concept of just onboarding, because everyone wants to jump straight into training. And I will say this because I walk into workrooms as a very experienced upholsterer. And in a lot of workrooms, it's still tough because there is no process for onboarding. There's no orientation to kind of go, well, here's how these sewing machines operate, or our expectations, or where the notes are. Look at onboarding, because even if you're training accountants, or you're hiring accountants, or you're hiring teachers, like, even if skill is assumed, there is a certain amount of staying with your candidate to make sure that they understand expectations and where to find things and how to operate things, because there is more nuance to your business than you might realize. And education does not train an employee how to function in your specific business. That the business has to pick up. So, yeah, we do need more trained upholsterers, and we're going to have to get real creative about how that happens. But I actually think there's really a lot of benefit. There's a lot of upside to training in the business. But yeah, it's not easy. It's certainly not easy, but we're nothing if not optimistic. Banged our head against it for 20 years. Why not go another 20? We're starting to find solutions. And I tell you what, the candidates who have gotten through, are really, really smart. You had to be smart to get a business started in the last 10 and 20 years. So do I go over any onboarding guidelines in any of the classes that we teach? Not exactly, but our whole fundamentals program is really kind of a great big employee orientation. If I'm being honest, I mean, and what's tricky is that it's not going to be your workroom standards, but we're teaching them our workroom standards and processes, and really starting them small and going through, all the forms and all the abbreviations and all the everything, so that hopefully if you're using that as a training tool, you're going to have to modify some things. You're going to have to say, you know what, here we label on the top edge instead of the bottom. And here we do our welt cord different. We do our zippers different. But really the whole program is, it's a giant onboarding training exercise. And I really like my future dreams on my vision board at home. Yes, I have a vision board. We should all have a vision board. I would really love eventually to do like a workroom manager training program, because I think that management is so key to success. I don't know if that answered like 7 questions you didn't ask, Jill, but, and I will be really curious. And seriously, next time you have an apprentice that you like, Jill, have them go through this program. And it is a single-use license. So the idea would be that your apprentice owns it. Either you reimburse them, or they buy it themselves, or you buy it for them. But just a heads up, it is a single-use license so that they can review it as many times as they want. Yeah, Sarah, I wish I had a good answer for you. Honestly, I mean, and I had to reach a point in my career when I was like, turns out I'm not an employee, I'm an owner. So I think you should be thinking about how to train your own apprentice at this point. That's what I think. I wish I had better guidance for you. It is very tricky to get your foot into some of these workroom doors, but I'm looking at some of the younger owners who are receptive to hiring and training and collaborating. The workroom manager thing. Oh, but Jill, also, yeah, check out Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. Check that out. That was such a good book. And I think it's listed on my website under the workroom owners section. We have a workroom owners tab. That one had really good guidance on how to structure onboarding, because it is such an important part. Because if I walk into any of your workrooms tomorrow, I may know upholstery, but I need you to tell me, where do you keep stuff? Who do you want me to ask when I have a question? How do you, everybody I've ever met has really bizarre preferences about how they want their machine threaded. That's fine, but you're going to have to show me. So, but that's a great book to check out. Even though it's still early, the first instructor. Yay, I'm so excited Carla's here. Yes, our first 2 cohorts are going through right now. Sarah Lindy's in there, really happy to have you. And our fall sessions have just started filling. So we'd love to see some people in there. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. You can email info@thefunkylittle.chair.com. You can reach out to Carla as our first virtual instructor. Michelle Minner will be our second. Or reach out to any of our students who are taking it, because you're the early adopters. You're the charter members who are going to, we love the feedback. I want to know how it was helpful. And I want to know, if there's anything that we can do better. We really are anxious. If you are a business trying to retain apprentices, we'd like to see you be successful. So, hey, thanks for coming, Monica. I think Jill had to bounce. Are there any last questions? I'm empowered to start and stop the webinar now. Did I miss any? All right. Thanks for being here, Jamie. Thank you for Sarah and Ruti. I think I've about answered any questions. If you think of anything else, the Funky Little Chair is on Instagram. We are on Facebook. I personally answer those messages. The info at our new office manager answers. And of course, we have our instructors that can also speak to our programming. So check it out. Lots of information on the website. And if there's questions it doesn't answer, let us know. But everyone have a great day. Thank you very much for spending part of your Tuesday in here listening and talking about this. Thanks, Carla. I will see you tomorrow. Oh, wait. I feel like I dropped the ball, you guys. If you're still in here, I missed the Q&A section because I was watching the chat. Oh, it's so good to see you, Rhonda. You could teach the heck out of an apprentice. Let's see. People I've trained have gone off. Yep. A lot of people do go start their own business. It's true. All right. But that's where it becomes really key to go. Were they an asset while we had them as an employee? And I've had several of my past students have opened their own business in the Twin Cities area, and a couple of them actually farm work back to me when there's something that's too complex for them to handle. So if you're really afraid of your apprentice leaving, then maybe apprenticing is not for you. But I would encourage you to see that employee, if they're an asset while they're in your business, it's not a loss. And if they left and you still have a good relationship with them, it is not a loss. They can be a strategic partner for you. But you do have to be prepared for the possibility that your apprentices will absolutely move on and do what is best for their career path, as they should, and as you should be doing what is best for your business. So, but yeah, if that really stresses you out, the possibility that they may leave and open their shop, apprenticing might not be your bag. So, all right, you know where to find me if you have questions. And I think I caught them all. I love the idea of creating systems. Oh, systems is my favorite word in the whole world this year. So, all right, speaking of systems, I'm going to go pegboard up our tools so that we're ready for live workshops. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for coming.